Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could teach the gullible to never be so comfortable, but not to eat like comfort food, to disregard the bogus claims and pseudoscientific claims? Can you imagine just how much indeed the world would change? No more political predators playing on the populace with ilkas and plots to shift and kill metropolis. No more villains with the title in the Bible, holding phony temper Bibles like the stuff they teach is vital. Imagine it was normal to have to prove a claim you make, and folks really feel ashamed expressing content that was fake. It's not to say we never make mistakes, it's just to say we go out of our way to show the evidence it takes.
Remain skeptical while you travel the road of reason. Stay strapped with logic and fast. That's what it is, yo. Keep reality intact to help the truth grow. Question every claim, especially the ones you believe in. Remain skeptical while you travel the road of reason.
Hi, welcome to Road to Reason, Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century. I'm your host, Kayla Turzak, and this is our co-host,
Scott Maddox.
Well, we just welcome you today. If you ever want to watch us online, you can always find us live on Ustreams on Sunday at 3 p.m. If you can't catch us live, then you can always go to our YouTube channel, Road to Reason TV. And if you're in the area on channel 36 in the Fairfax County area, you can always catch us. And you can always go check out our Facebook page if you want to see what kind of shows we're going to be having and if you want announcements and some news items. Today we're going to be interviewing Phil Ferguson, an investment advisor and president of Polaris Financial Advising. Phil uses his skills to benefit the public, offering financial education on his podcast, The Phil Ferguson Show, which is a part of the Secular Media Network, on a variety of financial issues. An active member of the secular community, he advocates for skeptical thinking in all aspects of life, especially in investing practices. In a world of accepting, gambling, investing can feel like a get-rich scheme, but Phil is here to tell us otherwise. We do have an announcement. In our area, DC metro area, we're going to have the Reason Rally 2016. Yep. Reason Rally is a celebration of fact-driven public policy, the value of public speaking, voting power of secular Americans, and the rally will be held on June 4th, 2016 at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, DC, along with other events at nearby hotels. One of those events is actually one of our own events. Road to Reason will be hosting a workshop at the Washington Court Hotel and on June 5th, which will be at 1:15 to 2:45. We're basically going to be talking about how to get into your local public access stations, whether it be radio or TV, and just talk to you about secular media in general and how to get involved in your communities. And if you're in the area, how to get involved with our show. So we are going to have our Skeptic of the Week and some news items.
Yep. So this week's Skeptic is a Game of Thrones character, not a real person. His name is Sir Davos Seaworth, and he is known as a guy who has a background in smuggling items. During a certain war, he helped Stannis Baratheon and his troops survived starvation by delivering onions to them, and he thus became known as the Onion Knight, and it was used as like a derogatory term for a while, and he kind of like reappropriated and like, you know, wears it kind of like a badge of honor, you know, because there's much goodness in helping people survive starvation, even if it is just onions that you're eating. But the reason why he's the skeptic guy that I chose this week is he is well known as like a guy who has a lot of disdain for the many religions of the series Game of Thrones. And in a recent episode, he said something, and I'm paraphrasing, along the lines of, I don't care much for the old gods or the new gods or your gods or anyone's gods. However, and he's talking to this character Melisandre, who is very devoutly religious and from time to time has done some pretty weird things that seem supernatural. And he is, oftentimes been witness to these events, such as a shadow creature being born from her body that went on to assassinate King Renly Baratheon, Stannis' brother, and he's seen all this weird stuff going on. He doesn't know if it's because of gods or the individual doing these things, but there came a time where he's like, I don't believe any of this stuff, but work your magic or whatever it is and see if maybe you can bring this other character, Jon Snow, back to life after a multiple stabbing, and I believe a few days went by where he was dead. So yeah, I enjoy the show, and I think he's a cool character. And I think the show in general is very interesting because there's not a lot of shows that put as much emphasis on varying religions of the characters as Game of Thrones does.
Okay. And we have a couple news items.
Yep.
I believe we have time for maybe one news item and a discussion of it.
So in Iran, there's a news story profiling a few women and what they were doing to kind of skirt the morality police that exist in Iran and kind of go around and bully people. I'm not sure if they're officially sanctioned by the Iranian government, but it's kind of like a fact of life over there, where if you're not wearing your hijab, or if you got hairs hanging out and stuff, you could get beat up. Who knows? They just go around like bullies or mafia. And so the interesting thing that's been going on there is that there's been numbers of women, taking off their hijabs, going out in public, cutting their hair short, wearing men's clothing, hats, pants, shorts, and just, enjoying life, going out in public and not worrying as much about these bullies coming around and hassling them.
I actually heard that they recently had some elections where they got a lot more liberal thinking, forward thinking people into office. They voted in some women who had better opinions about women and women's rights.
That's good.
I believe it was 10 years ago or so, there was a huge shift towards more conservative ideas. But a lot of the young people today are really fighting for separation of church and state, or mosque and state, you could say.
Right. And I'm not sure if it's Saudi Arabia or Iran, but in their parliament they have now, I think, more women in the parliament than they do clerics. And I think before, clerics had a very almost guaranteed seats in parliament there.
Yeah.
So things are slowly changing, it seems, for the better.
All right. So we had one more news item?
So in Oklahoma this week, this is kind of like a news thing that then became kind of a moot point, where the Oklahoma state legislature passed a bill to ban abortions. And as many people know, Roe v. Wade makes abortion legal at the federal level. So it's questionable whether this law has teeth or is even constitutionally legal. But some of the provisions in this law were going to be that no abortion allowed whatsoever, not even in the cases of incest, rape, health of the woman, risks to health. The only exception that they stipulated was if the woman is definitely clearly going to die, and it's who decides that? And but also there's going to be penalties to doctors where they would lose their license to practice any kind of medicine in the state, and also a 1-year jail sentence for anyone who performs one. However, the governor vetoed it, Mary Fallin, and this is the latest in or Fallon, and this is the latest in a series of very conservative laws that are being passed in states in the Bible Belt in the South, but are being vetoed by governors, either seeing that they're not reason-based, or it'd be a headache to implement or enforce. And really, I think so far, North Carolina is the only one where the governor has actually signed into law any of these, what I would consider crazy laws.
Yep. It looks like at least we're holding off on some of the crazier laws, and we are trying to move in a better direction here in the States. So we're actually done with this section. We're going to be interviewing Phil Ferguson in a moment. Before that, we're going to get you with some PSAs.
This is Hemant Mehta of FriendlyAtheist.com, and I invite you to join me at the Reason Rally in Washington, D.C. at the Lincoln Memorial on June 4th, 2016, celebrating the fact that we understand what most of America doesn't, that no God is watching over us, and it's up to us to make the world a better place. Check out reasonrally.org to see a list of all the events taking place that weekend. It's historic, it's free, and it's gonna be amazing.
Good. Homemade noodles. Marty, stop it. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. It reminds me, I've been thinking maybe we should try a new form of birth control. I heard about this one, it's called the IUD, intrauterine device. Or we could try the patch on your arm. Actually, I think that one goes on your butt.
Bedsider.org has birth control information and a lot more. And it's...
What do you think then? Arm or the butt?
There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday. Each week, the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube, and remember to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, or there'll be hell to pay.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
I'm Paul Sheehan, executive producer of Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, and I'm inviting our viewers to join us in Washington, D.C. on June 4th at the Lincoln Memorial for Reason Rally 2016. If you care about public access television, freedom of speech, and you feel that atheist and skeptical thinking people should have a voice, then you will definitely want to be at Reason Rally. The day after, on June 5th, Road to Reason will be holding a workshop to discuss how to promote atheism and skepticism through public access television and through the internet. Make sure to visit our Facebook page for updates as to when and exactly where that will be held. See you at Reason Rally.
Hi. Have you ever wondered how to get involved in the big fish game of investing? What comes to mind when you think of putting your money in someone else's hands to gain a little something? I think of the movie Wolf of Wall Street, where sociopathic men in 2 clean suits swindle a quick $10,000 off of you. Well, Phil Ferguson is an investor who offers his knowledge on the subject of investing to the atheist and skeptic community. Having a valid investment may not be as difficult and scary as it sounds. So, hi Phil, thank you for coming on our show today.
Hello.
Hi, so before we begin talking about investing items, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the organizations you've been involved in. You really give yourself and your time to a lot of nonprofit organizations as well as for-profit organizations.
Absolutely. I was about 4 or 5 years on the board of the Secular Student Alliance. I was also on the board of Atheist Alliance International, and I am currently the treasurer for the board for the Reason Rally. And my business, Polaris Financial Planning, tithes 10% of gross revenue goes to supporting the secular movement.
It's pretty cool. I have a double question to begin with. So how did you get involved in financial investments and advising, and how did you tie that in? How did you begin tying that into helping out the atheist and skeptic communities?
Yeah, many years ago, I grew up knowing that my dad was a stock picking genius. In my first year back from college, I came home for the summer, and my dad sat me down and did one of those things that dads do. And he said, I want to show you where all the money is and how everything works. In case I get run over by a truck, you can take care of your brothers and your mom. And the first thing we look at is the stock. And I said, well, this lost 99% of its value. You didn't talk about that around the dinner table. And so he, like most people, remember the hits and forget the misses. Who wants to tell a story about a stock that you bought and it lost 99%? So that started me down this road of, how does this work? Why do people buy stocks and not remember the ones that they lost money on? What is a good way to make money? And I started researching that. And over the years, as I got my education and my master's in business, I knew a lot about investing, and people started asking me questions, and I would give them answers. And at one point, someone said, can I pay you for your advice? And I was like, I don't think that, I don't know how that works, so don't worry about it. And after 4 or 5 people individually wanted to pay me, I thought maybe I should figure out how that works and at least collect the money they want to hand me. So that's kind of what started that. As far as the atheistic secular movement, about 10 years ago, I started donating to conferences. And one of the conferences said, do you want a table? And my thought was, what in the world does a finance guy do with a table at an atheist conference? That doesn't make any sense. That's silly. And they said, well, you're donating more money than people are paying for the table. So I said, okay, I get bored sitting in a lecture hall, so I'll just stand at my table and talk to people. And I did a couple and a couple more, and then someday someone came up to me and they said, so are you an atheist? And I said, I am. And they go, and you promote atheist causes? I said, I do. And they said, well, I have an advisor now that I don't like. Can I hire you instead? Okay, why not? And so that started that, and then I've done more and more conferences, and last year I was at 14 different conferences. Almost all of them I tabled. The vast majority I gave a talk, and I give talks on how to apply skepticism to investing, and also one of my more well-known talks is how to help children out of religion.
That's really interesting. So my parents are believers. They believe in Christianity, specifically Baptist evangelical kind of faith, and they're very proud about the fact that they go to faith-based financial advisors, and they're actually really good people. You know, I kind of did a little background digging, asked about the man. He is a judiciary, which we'll talk about later. But one of the reasons why they go to this man is because they agree with his financial philosophy, because it's faith-based, as they believe. Is there a specific financial philosophy that you have that you think is kind of should be a shared philosophy within a skeptic community?
Well, gosh.
That would bring people to you.
Yeah, lots of parts to that question. My first thought is the Bible-based investing. I saw that when I lived in the state of Arkansas. That's right below Missouri, in case you didn't hear of it before. There was Bible-based investing, and they would take quotes from the Bible, and of course, just like any different form of Christianity, they wouldn't always necessarily agree. So I found that interesting. That's what actually came up with the idea of science-based investing or skeptical investing. As far as do I have a specific philosophy, of course I do. Everyone does. Should you all follow it? Not necessarily. I have a certain way of doing things. One, for example, is most people have no business buying individual stocks. There's a lot of risk if you only have a few stocks, and it can be very expensive to have a lot of stocks, and it can be very time consuming to do so. So absolutely have individual philosophies, and of course that's all in my show if someone were to actually want to go listen to it.
Okay, so these are like logic-based philosophies, meaning you're not necessarily drawing from a specific philosophy based on faith. You're saying, I would like to come to the conclusions that I have based off of a very skeptical attitude.
Or like tried and true methods of investing.
There's some things that are I'll just simply say are my opinions, and we can have difference of opinions, but there's other things. As an example, the U.S. stock market returns 10% a year in the long run, and I mean 15 to 20 years at a time. In the short run, almost anything can happen, but in the long run, it makes 10% a year. And if you look out 25 years, the U.S. stock market returns 10% plus or minus 1.4% to one standard deviation. So you can have quite a solid certainty, at least based on historical data, because I don't know future data, what the stock market is going to do in the long run. So that's an empirical fact, whether that works out going forward or not. Another thing is that bonds tend to have lower returns, but lower volatility. Of course, there's different types of bonds, so it just depends on what you get into. And so a lot of these facts will feed into my opinions, but I'm trying to do that as much as I can. And then when I look at individual investment products or options that people can buy, one can analyze those mathematically, and often the person that's selling it to you is not paid to know how it works. They're not paid to tell you how it works. They're paid to sell it to you.
Is there like kind of a strain of gambling when it comes to investing? Is it kind of like the gambling a little bit more acceptable form of gambling? Because that's kind of how it's perceived by me, because I don't know much about investing.
Yeah, and that's, if you're buying individual stocks, it can feel a little bit more like gambling. Or when someone will call me and they say, all right, I want to try the stock market for a year. And I usually quote Yoda, and I said, there is no try, there is only do. One should not try the stock market. If you're trying, then you are gambling. The stock market might go up 33%, 38% like it did in 1995, or it could go down 37% like it did in 2008. What will happen in the 12 months after you start? I have no idea. It might as well be flipping a coin or rolling dice. Then it's like gambling. One thing that's really funny is that while you could relate it to gambling, the odds are in any given year, the stock market will return 110%, whereas each pull of the arm on the slot machine will return 90%.
Which means you're losing money.
Which means you're losing money. So if you're going to gamble with something that's likely to make you money.
Yeah. I had a question about has clients knowing about your atheistic beliefs, or do they know about that first of all, and has that affected business at all?
Well, I do have some clients that find me through friends or friends of friends that have no idea what I do in the secular movement, and it doesn't really have to come up. But with my show, it's really hard to avoid, because my show is 1/3 finance and 2/3 atheism. So you have to really close your ears after the first 10 or 15 minutes to miss that. But I also recently had someone who called me was an evangelical Christian and said they listen to my show every week, even though 2/3 of it usually is atheism, and that they'd want to hire me. And they said something I thought was very odd, is that they trust me more than anyone in their church.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's you got to really listen and think about what makes this person trustworthy. Is the advice sound reasonable and sound, and they can kind of it plays tricks with their mind, and they're like maybe atheists aren't all bad, and maybe they're onto something, or at least with this thing, everything else I disagree on. But
one thing that does actually worry me is that people will listen to several episodes of my show, and they'll send me an email without even checking that it's typed in correctly, and they'll send me actual statements, their 401ks, their IRAs, information about their age and their social security and their street address. Don't do that. I'm honored that there's something that I'm doing that gives you the impression that I'm trustworthy, but verify before you send anything. Talk to me first. But that's a weird thing for me, to have people trust me simply because they've heard my voice a few times. And I had someone send me an email and they said, "Why should I trust you?" And I said, "I've never asked you to trust me. Matter of fact, I tell people, question. That's what skeptics do. Question and verify everything.
Do your
There's
homework.
actually a word for the attachment to a public figure. Like, people actually feel like they know somebody and they can trust somebody who's on TV because they've seen so much of them. But the problem is that you don't know that person, and it's not a healthy habit to have to trust someone as easily as that.
Like cult of personality or celebrity worship a little.
You should start your own cult. You know how to get the money.
Spokespeople, you know, when Tiger Woods sells tennis shoes, they go, wow, I want that shoe because Tiger Woods is Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about is kind of on the topic of investing, but kind of on the topic of cognitive biases. Because one of the things that I found interesting listening to a couple of your shows is that a lot of the mentalities towards skeptical investing can be applied towards everything that you do in your life. Being careful and making sure that you're looking for the ways that your brain plays tricks on you. What is one of the main biases that you see people doing that's bad investing behavior?
Yeah, one of the things I often do is I relate investing, or at least the financial services industry, to religion. If you sit down with an insurance salesperson, they want to invoke fear. They want to sell you a solution. Then they take your money and they provide you very little benefit. That's the same thing a church does. It's the same model. You have to be terrified of something to take action. And that, I got to keep it clean on your show, that offends me. And one of the things that is very, very common in the world today is a thing called long-term healthcare insurance, where they will tell you, you could save up 20, 30, 40 years, your entire life, and then you spend a couple of years in a nursing home, which can be very expensive, and it's true, it can be very expensive, and your entire family's portfolio can be flushed down the toilet within a few years, and you go broke. And so you scare people with that, and then you provide them a solution. So you're providing a solution to a problem you just created, and then you take their money. And unfortunately, in that case, the benefits are often very, very small, and you would have been far better off just investing the money versus putting it in this insurance product.
And from a regulatory standpoint, there's a lot of financial products out there on the market for, you know, individual investors and clients and stuff to purchase, and but you know, a lot of them are junk products or very unwise investments, yet, you know, Congress or state governments aren't, you know, saying, well, this should be illegal. I think annuities is like an issue where I recently heard on C-SPAN they were talking about possibly regulating it or cutting, you know, clamping down on it a bit to have better disclosure to customers so they know that, like, you know, what the actual returns are going to be and stuff like that.
Absolutely. A few months ago, Elizabeth Warren, my favorite senator from Massachusetts, released a study that estimated that at least $17 billion a year of investors' money goes towards gifts, prizes, and vacations to pay the people to sell you insurance products and annuities. And that's publicly available. You can just search Elizabeth Warren and annuities. If you can't find it, of course, they could contact me if they wanted to. But the Department of Labor has been working, I think, almost a decade to pass what would be a redefinition of who qualifies or who has to qualify as a fiduciary. And that means the advisor would have to act in your best interest, which is staggering, honestly. Many modern countries in the world, I think all of them, when you go to an advisor, they have an obligation to do what's in your best interest. In the United States, they are specifically exempted from having a responsibility to you. They don't have to be a fiduciary. What they have to do is give you suitable investment advice, and there's no definition of what is suitable. So you basically would have to sue them and take them to court and prove that what they sold you was not suitable, and that may come down to just a matter of opinion, yours versus theirs.
Right.
It's a very hard thing to prove in court. But the fiduciary person has to do what's in your best interest, and they can be held legally responsible if they do something contrary to what's in your best interest. It doesn't prevent the market from going down. It doesn't prevent you from losing money, but it does reduce the opportunity for them to rip you off.
So I'm going to speak on behalf of people who are watching right now who know nothing about investing whatsoever. So in as simple terms as you can think of, how would someone start looking into investing in order to, where would you start if you really wanted to get into that?
Sure. The place I like to send people is have them read the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. It is a book that's so old it's out of copyright, so you can often find it free on the internet. I think someone read it on YouTube. You can get it at major booksellers for a few dollars. And it talks about why you save money. How does one save money? And one of the stories in that book I love so much is the richest man of Babylon himself is giving a lecture to all of the men in the city, because back then women wouldn't even think about saving or money because they're women. That's a joke, by the way, in case you didn't know for sure. But he's talking to them, and he asks them, via the Socratic method, why is it that you're here? Why don't you have money? Why don't you have investments? And one man suggests that if he could just make a little more money, he would be able to start saving and investing and make more money that way. And so he asked the crowd, does every man here make the same amount of money? Look at your neighbor to your left and to your right. Do the people around you make the same as you or different than you? And the crowd generally agrees that each man there made an amount of money equal to the skills and the talents that he has, and it would be a different amount. And so the richest man in Babylon on the stage says, so you all make a different amount of money, yet you're all equally broke. So it's not just about how much you make, although I will grant if someone makes $200,000, it should be easier to save than if you make $25,000. But anyone at any income level can start saving, and that's what you've got to do. I teach people how to money. And the very first step is you must spend less than you make. If you can't do that, everything else I talk about is kind of worthless.
Do you think that people who do live paycheck to paycheck, who really are in the lower income brackets, can get involved in saving money? And I mean, if you can't buy a new pair of shoes, how can you save up, $25?
Is it for them?
Well, I mean, if you only make enough money to get by and to live on, it's going to be really hard. That's not my expertise. I don't know how to help that person. You can get a better education. You can always change jobs. It's easier to say than it is to do. I tell people all the time, I've spent my entire life struggling to follow my own advice. I know how much you need to save, but it's not as easy as doing it. But I often see people that are making $60,000, $80,000, or even, like I said, $250,000, and they can't pay their credit card bills because we are too eager to spend money and we're not eager enough to save it, because who wants to wait? But there's certain rules of thumb, and I can't use the same words that I use on my show, so I'll just simply say, if you're saving 10% a year for retirement, it's not enough. You're not going to make it unless you started when you're 22, because it takes over 40 years to save up enough money to be able to live on that in retirement, and part of that's because of inflation. So as you're making more money every year, it's becoming worth less every year. If you save 20%, you might be able to do it in 25 years. So if you're 30 or 35 or 40, now you can save 20% and make retirement at a reasonable age. If you are on the younger side, I think Social Security is always going to be there, but it may not be as generous, if that's the right word, as it is today, because it's not a whole lot of money, but it can help out an awful lot.
This is a little bit off topic, and if you just let me know if you don't want to talk about politics in general, but do you think that there is a specific political position that would be a little bit more adverse to investing or participating in like a capitalistic system like this? Is there like a moral reason not to participate in this in like investments?
Gosh, I'm not 100% sure how to interpret the question, so let me answer this way. The more money is spread out across the system, the better it is for the stability and the strength of the economy. So if you have a handful of people that have all the money, and you take a billionaire, how many pairs of jeans can one billionaire buy? I mean, 5, 10, 50, 100. I mean, at some point, you don't need more jeans. You don't need more cars. Once you've bought a half a dozen boats or a couple of houses, how many more do you need? But if all that money is spread out amongst 10,000 or 100,000 people, if they all just buy one pair of jeans, that is way more stimulus into the economy, and we get a stronger economy and things grow faster and better for everybody when money is spread around. Now, that offends some people because it sounds like socialism. So I'm not saying that we forcibly require everyone to give up every penny, but the people who have made millions and who have made billions, who then turn around and say, I don't want to share, I did it all myself, forget about the education that they had. They forget about the public school that they went to, although not always. They forget about the roads that allow them to do commerce. They forget about the security that our government and military provides. They forget about all the things that have been done before them, and they take all the credit and they want to keep all the money and never give anything back. I find that offensive.
One of the things that you said in one of your interviews that I watched, you said that some people believe that money is never made. That you can only just take from other people in order to get more money for yourself. So I think that when we're thinking along the lines of making money more evenly distributed, we're not just thinking, oh, we're taking from these rich people who have too much. We're also thinking along the lines of, how can I create something for this economy? How can I make this economy better by using my know-how and my skills to benefit me and my economy?
Yeah, there's a whole lot of awesome in that statement, and I think there's a couple things that are mixed together. One was what I was just talking about, which some would accuse me of wanting to redistribute wealth, and I will clarify that, yes, that's what I just said. So I'm not hiding behind it. Tax rates for wealthy people should be higher than they are for poor people. Now, as far as can an individual contribute, yes, and maybe there is some responsibility also on people who don't have a good job for them to find something more productive. Because if what you're doing provides very little value to the owner of the business you're working for, or to the economy, or to the system, maybe you need to find something else to do. I used to think that there was two types of people who liked their job and stayed, or people who didn't like their job and left. Well, there's a third category, and it's a very frustrating category, people that hate their job but stay year after year after year, often getting paid next to nothing. You can always quit and find another job. You can always get more education, and yes, that can be very hard to do, but you've got to find time to make that happen, and not everybody has the resources or the means to do it, which is the part that's not necessarily fair. But if you can become more valuable and do something that's fewer people can do or harder to outsource, you can get paid more money. I don't know if I've answered the question you were asking. I'm sorry.
That's pretty much it. That last statement wasn't a question. It was more of like elaborating on, because what you said sounded like only distributing the wealth, but that's not necessarily the only thing. What you're doing gives people individual power to create wealth, not necessarily just taking away any wealth from anybody else.
Right, because one way to create wealth for yourself is be more valuable for the work that you do. But the thing that I really love focusing on in that book, The Richest Man in Babylon, focuses on, and what I found is magic when my dad explained to me a little bit about how investing works, your money can make money for you. That to me is staggering, because your money makes money, and then if you don't spend that, you have more money, and more money makes more money, and more money makes more money. And it doesn't grow linearly, it grows exponentially. It's the starting that gets very difficult, and it grows and it grows and it grows, and then hopefully when you're in your 40s, it grows faster, in your 50s, it grows more, and in your 60s, you have enough money, at some point 62, 65, 67, for some people it's sooner, that you can now take out 4 or 5%, maybe even 6% of your money every year, and still never, ever run out of money. And so my definition of rich is not defined by the assets that you have, or the amount of money, or the size of your portfolio. It's when you do have enough money that you no longer have to work for the purpose of earning money. Your money now earns all the money you need, and you don't have to work at all. You could still choose to work, you don't have to work. That to me is being rich.
A lot of this, commentary and advice or whatever, I don't know if advice is the right word, but a lot of this is very easier said than done. And I mean, I'm a small-time investor myself, and I think a lot of getting into investing there's kind of like a high threshold of knowledge that you have to learn before you can, figure out how to do it, and then, not you lose everything in the process that you've invested. And do you have any suggestions for good ways for lay people to get involved, like maybe investment clubs or seminars, or I don't know?
Yeah, the investment clubs historically have had a bad track record, so I'm not a real big fan of that. Just because you're sitting around with 4 or 5 other people that also know nothing like you doesn't mean you suddenly become smart. Education, teaching yourself. Investopedia is a website that is not tied to anything in the financial services industry, and it just provides definitions of words. There's magazines and newspapers that you can read, and you read them to become familiar with the language. You read them to become familiar with how the system works. Just don't follow any of their specific investment advice, because they often are giving short-term advice. What funds are popular or hot today, which often turns out that the hottest things today are the ones that fall the fastest next year. Not always, but sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. It's hard to know. If you really want to get an in-depth history and education, the other book that I love is called Common Sense on Mutual Funds by John C. Bogle. Bogle. He is actually the founder of the Vanguard Mutual Fund Company, and it is a very thick book. You do not sit and read this in 3 or 4 hours. You should treat it as a textbook. Read a section at a time, whatever your pace is. And if you are young, educate yourself first. Don't be in a hurry. You have a lot of time. If you are getting close to retirement, you should also pause, because when you're in a hurry and do something fast, that's how you make big mistakes. So if you're sitting down with somebody and they give you what is obviously a sales pitch that says, if you don't buy this today, it's not going to be here tomorrow, you shouldn't just leave. You should run away from this advisor, because they are not acting as a fiduciary. They're trying to sell you something, and they want to scare you.
Yeah. And part of human nature is, and I make this comparison to what it's like leaving religion, and you've invested for decades, like your time, your money through tithing and donations, and emotional investment and informational investment in a church, and then leaving becomes that much harder, because there's so much that you're kind of throwing away, or
you have to admit you were wrong after all that time investing in something that's not giving you what you need out of it.
Yep, and that's a great
investing
analogy.
Money is the same.
And a lot of the materials I read that are put up by the industry to advisors will often tell them, never tell your prospective client that their investments are awful. Always tell them, I think I can do a little better. Because if you tell them it's awful, it's like telling someone their religion is wrong and their religion is a lie. And they're often not in a position where they want to hear that. Now, thankfully for me, because I deal with the skeptic community, and I have a very hard time filtering my opinions. I'm trying really hard not to swear on this show.
Thank you.
But yeah, you're welcome. It's one of those things that when people bring me investments, if they are awful, I will flat out tell them they're awful. Now, the good skeptic says, show me why you think it's awful.
Right.
And then I have a job to do to convince them that it's awful, but they're willing to listen. And once I've convinced them that it's awful, then they say, okay, what do I need to do to fix it? But not every investor can do that. I once had a talk planned at a Christian women's club, which I know would be really surprising for anyone that knows me. And 2 weeks before my talk, they called me and canceled because they were afraid that the information I would provide to their members would show them that they've made terrible investment mistakes, and they thought that might embarrass their members. So what are you going to do?
So that's really interesting how, like, if you don't have a skeptic mindset, I mean, we do talk a lot in our community about how, religion affects every part of your life and can really mess you up on so many different, believing in things that are not true. And having a culture of believing things that are not true can really mess you up. But it's really interesting to hear that anecdote because it really makes you realize, wow, that really is true.
Yeah, and another example, and I'll call her Jane. That's the name I always use for this person. It's a friend of the family. She came over to the house one day, and this was like 10 years ago, and she said, "Hey, Phil, I followed your advice." Oh, that's one of the worst things I've ever heard. Every time that someone comes and tells me they followed my advice, I know I'm in trouble because A, they didn't.
And if they're not on your client list, you're like, do not sue me.
The first piece of my advice is that you talk to me. So you didn't do that. And then she tells me that she took the $5,000 that she had, every penny that she had, and she bought a stock. But it's okay because she bought it at half price. And I'm like, I don't even understand what that means in the context of the investing world. You can never buy a stock for half price because what you paid for it should be what it's worth. And the other person sold it. And this person happened to sell Mary Kay Cosmetics. Not a knock, not an endorsement in either case. I'm just saying. And so I said, when you have these parties, do you ever sell like a starting kit? And she says, yeah, it sells for $100. And I said, what does it cost you? And she embarrassingly says $50. And I said, that's not a problem. You got to make money. All the stores mark things up. That's how they stay in business. Next time someone wants one of those, sell it to them for $25 or half of what it's worth. And she just stared at me. She says, why would I do that? And I said, exactly. Why did someone just sell you a stock for half its price? That doesn't make any sense. And so we looked at the company, and we pull up, some information on the, what do they call it, the inner tubes. And she's looking at all these numbers, and she goes, yeah, I saw a bunch of stuff like that, but I don't know what any of it means. Well, why did you hand someone $5,000? And we look at the company, and they're working on creating a proprietary technology that'll harvest the constant and powerful static electricity from the Earth's upper atmosphere.
Sounds like a perpetual motion machine.
It's free energy, yeah. They want to float helium balloons up into the atmosphere, weather balloons, and tether them to the ground. And so that static discharge will be collected and conducted down this cable and run entire cities. Now, for those of you who aren't weather experts, there's only one period of time where you get generally large static discharges, and it's called a thunderstorm. Weather balloons are incredibly thin and don't do well with wind shear and thunderstorms, and so these balloons will shred and possibly drop 5 miles of a carbon fiber cable down to the earth. What could go wrong?
That's
so I'm thinking, this is a no-starter. And so I explained to her all this, and of course she gets very sad and almost at the edge of tears. And I said, that's okay. You're going to go back to your broker, and I've got to carefully word this for your show. You go back to the broker and you explain to them that you want your money back. And the broker will say, oh, pretty little lady, don't worry your little head. That's how investing works. Sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down. I just think you hold still and you're going to be fine. And then you explain to them that you got ripped off and you want your money back. And if they don't give it to you, you get the boss over. And if the boss doesn't give it to you, you're going to go to your state's Securities and Exchange Department and file an official complaint. And for $5,000, they don't want to deal with that. They'll turn around and hand you the money. And she said, oh, Phil, I can't possibly do that. He's a member of my church. I don't want to ruin his reputation.
For $5,000? I'd ruin anyone's. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, for $5,000.
I'd ruin their business.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, this is a woman who, the only reason she had $5,000 is because they stopped paying her mortgage.
This is God.
Yes.
I've ruined people for far less than $5,000.
Foreskins, right?
Yeah, foreskins. I thought it was $1. She had $5,000 because she stopped paying her mortgage because it was about to be foreclosed on because her husband just got convicted of felony because he was stealing money from his employer, and I cannot make this up, I'm not that clever, on hookers and blow. So she was about to get convicted.
She's got problems worse than...
And the person in her church knew all of this information and took her $5,000, and if you saw Wolf of Wall Street, you know that the maximum commission someone can make on a penny stock is 50%. I don't know what this person made as an actual commission, but he could have made $2,500 off of her $5,000 investment. and her money is gone, and she refused to even go ask for it back because it was someone in her church.
Wow. Wow. That's insane.
Yeah.
You'd think that people would be a little smarter about their money.
Well, it's one of those things, it's not taught in high school.
Affinity fraud. That's the name for it.
It's not taught in college. And quite frankly, the vast majority of the financial services industry, they don't want you to know how things work. I had someone come to me that used to be in the military, and there was this company who I will not name, but they said they take 50% commission for the first year, and then after that you never pay a commission again. And they explained that other companies will charge you year after year after year, your entire life, 50, 60, 70 years. This way you only pay it one time and you're done. And so he's all excited, he puts money in, and he comes back next year for his annual meeting, and the guy says, you know what, you need an IRA. And so they open an IRA. Guess what happens? The clock starts over. That new account, he pays 50%.
They exponentially whittle it down.
Yeah. Next year he meets the advisor and he says, you need a Roth IRA. And then they come back and they say, you need another IRA. Every year, well, almost every year, in 12 years, this guy opened up 10 different accounts. In 10 different times, everything he put in for the first 12 months, he lost one half of his money. And it's interesting, in the podcast that I did this in, the United States Congress took this situation and they passed a law saying that you could no longer sell these types of products to people in the military.
And it is really important to have a top-down kind of structure of making sure that there are actual laws against people swindling people's money like this. But do you think that the spread of skepticism and certain attitudes towards religion and false science could actually help this industry get rid of its con artists?
Yeah, I mean, if people are more skeptical and question things that look too good to be true, it's harder to get ripped off.
Yeah.
Not impossible, of course. But there is so much involved and so many complications that there needs to be better regulatory oversight, and we need to have the Department of Labor's fiduciary rule where the advisor at least has to act in your best interest. When someone can make 50% commission by talking you into something, how can that possibly be interpreted as they're doing what's right for you? They're doing what's right for them.
There needs to be more informed consumers and honest brokers.
And if you guys want, we could talk also about secular or atheist topics, because my show often talks about that, and I just had an issue with little sticks to beat little kids.
Can you do it in 6 minutes?
Absolutely.
I
Actually,
can,
5
of
minutes.
course. About 6 weeks ago, I got contacted by one of my listeners, and they had stumbled across a letter that was sent to a friend of theirs who bought a house that used to be a fundamentalist Christian's house. And this letter was from a guy in Montana who for $8 will sell you a virtually indestructible polyurethane stick to beat your child. And it's just the right size to provide pain, but it's big enough that it won't leave a permanent mark. And so we had this letter, we had all these Bible quotes and all this stuff, so we read it on my show, the Phil Ferguson show, we talked about it, and I even called the guy and said, I got this letter from someone in my church, and I wanted to make sure I was sending money in the right place. And the guy called me back and said, yeah, this is me, this is the address, here's where you send the check, confirmed everything, so we put the show up. Well, a couple of days later, the Friendly Atheist shared a story about it, raw story. The major, almost mainstream media shared the story.
What?
And a few days ago, I got a phone call from this guy. He left me a voicemail, and I thought, okay, I've had it, because I told him my name was Phil. He thought it was Bill, but he thought, I didn't hide my name. He has my phone number, and all of the images that I shared all across the internet all say the Phil Ferguson Show. So he leaves me this voicemail, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what is it going to say? And I'm going to have to deal with this guy. So I listened to the voicemail, and he called me up and told me that he found out that the sticks that he's selling is now on the internet. And I'm thinking, yep, I'm in trouble, right? And then he says, Bill, I'm going to have to apologize. I'm getting out of the business for the safety of my family, and I can't sell it to you. If you already sent the check, I'll just rip it up and send it back to you. And I wanted to call and apologize that I can't sell you the sticks.
So he didn't know that it was you.
He didn't make the connection.
Right.
So the irony, of course, first of all, this guy asked for the information to not be put on the internet. What am I supposed to do? I'm compelled. When you want to talk about beating children and you tell me not to put it on the internet, I have an obligation. I have to put it on the internet. That's how the internet works.
Right.
But
unless he's paying you not to do it. There has to be a contract in place.
But then a couple days later, to have him call me and apologize for not being able to sell one to me, to Phil Ferguson, the guy that made this spread on the internet and put him out of business, I couldn't stop laughing about it.
I would have thought it would have been accidentally good for business. I would have bought one just to have a child beating stick as funny.
Does it work on other people's kids?
Yeah, it would work on anybody. Matter of fact, he had a slightly smaller version that you could use on your toddler.
Oh wow! I mean, that's not unheard of. When I was within the Christian community, I myself was not raised in a very fundamentalist home, but I have friends who were a part of fundamentalist homes, and they would read this literature about keeping children on a towel,
on a blanket,
on a blanket, where literally they'd set up a blanket and they'd train the child like a dog. So when it crawled off or rolled off the blanket, they would swat it with something and then put it back on the blanket.
With one of these sticks,
blanket training.
That's what it's called. It's called
so if you ever
blanket
want
training.
to bring them to someone's house, you can put them on any blanket.
I would correct though that you said train the child like a dog. No one ever successfully trains a dog by beating it.
That's true.
It's not trained. It's scared out of its mind of you. And
traumatized.
With the kid, it's scared of you, it's terrified of you, and you have created terror, which, no big surprise, when the world you live in says, if you don't love me, I'm going to roast you over and over and over for all of eternity in a lake of fire. How much worse can you be as a parent?
And it is those types of mentalities that you bring into when you grow up and become an investor. If you want to get ahead of life, but you feel like life is going to fall in on you if you make the wrong mistake, and you make a mistake out of fear. You start investing because somebody's feeding you the same types of fear that you're used to fearing.
One of the cheeky things I tell people, have you ever known someone that's always tried to strike it rich? Did you ever notice they're always trying?
Mm-hmm.
That's not a methodology to build wealth. It's slow and steady. It's the proverbial tortoise and the hare. You want to be the turtle. I've had people come to me and they say, I'm 2 or 3 years from retirement. Okay, now where do I start? I'm like, do you believe in the power of prayer? Because that may be all you've got. When you've got 3 years, you can't save very much money. You can't grow it. You need to start. You need to start yesterday. That's not an option. So you got to start today. You got to save more, and it just takes a lot of money, a lot of wise investing. Don't rush into anything, and then it takes a lot of time.
All right. Well, we've got about a minute left, and you have about, let's say, 40 seconds to just plug any books, anything that you want, as long as you're not endorsing it for people to pay.
I wouldn't think of endorsing anything ever. My podcast is called The Phil Ferguson Show, which I'm a naming savant. I couldn't even come up with that myself. So that's that. And the books that I love are Richest Man in Babylon and Common Sense on Mutual Fund by John Bogle. I don't make any money on those. You can even get them free at your library. Check those out. Educate yourself. And of course, if you find my show interesting, I'd love to have a conversation with you about it.
All right. Thank you for coming again on the show. We really appreciated it. It was really great learning about how to be a skeptic on our finances.
Yep.
Awesome. And if you want to stay after the show and speak to us a little bit more for our online audience, that would be great.